We all remember the Monday Night Wars. The big moments are legendary. You had NWO invasions, the DX tank rolling up to WCW's front door, Stone Cold stunning anything with a pulse, and Goldberg's unbelievable streak. These are the stories that have been told 1,000 times, the moments that defined an era and are burned into the brain of every wrestling fan. They were epic, they were revolutionary, and they changed the business forever. But that's only half the story. Beyond the headlines and the Hall of Fame reels, the war between WWE and WCW was filled with moments so bizarre, so chaotic, and so completely insane that they've been practically erased from history. We're not talking about big-name defections. We're talking about Hulk Hogan claiming he saw a ghost in a mirror and backstage legends about Sid Vicious and a pet squirrel. This wasn't just a battle for ratings. It was a festival of pure madness. And today we're unearthing the 10 craziest moments from the war that you've probably forgotten about. Section 10. The Latino World Order. Kicking off our list at number 10 is a storyline that was actually kind of brilliant, but was tragically cut short and left in the shadow of its more famous counterpart, the Latino World Order, or LWO. In late 1998, Eddie Guerrero, fed up with his spot in WCW, decided to form his own faction. It was a direct parody of the New World Order, but it was fueled by the very real frustration of the incredibly talented luchadors on the roster who felt they weren't getting the respect or TV time they deserved. Eddie started forcibly recruiting every other Latino wrestler on the show, leading to a fantastic personal rivalry with a reluctant Rey Mysterio Jr. Mysterio wanted no part of it, leading to some absolutely incredible matches between the two masters. Eventually, Rey was forced to join the LWO after losing to Eddie. But here's the twist. When a real-life car accident put Eddie Guerrero on the shelf, Rey Mysterio was the only member who stayed loyal, wearing the LWO shirt and even feuding with the NWO over the group's honor. It was a compelling, character-driven story that finally gave a spotlight to some of the world's best performers. But with Eddie's injury and the NWO storyline swallowing everything else, the LWO just faded away, becoming a huge what-could-have-been moment that many fans have completely forgotten. Section 9. Raven sells a fan attack. In the Wild West of 90s wrestling, the line between performance and reality was constantly blurred, but nobody walked that line better than Raven in WCW. Known for his dark, psychological character, Raven would often deliver his brooding promos while sitting right there in the front row with the fans. This created an intimate and seriously unpredictable atmosphere. And during one live event, things got a little too real. While Raven was cutting a promo, a fan suddenly jumped the guardrail and tackled him. Security swarmed, the show ground to a halt, and for all the world it looked like a dangerous, legitimate security breach. But here's the crazy part. It was all a work. The fan was a plant, part of the show designed to make Raven's storylines feel even more dangerous. Raven sold the attack so perfectly, and the chaos that followed felt so genuine, that nearly everyone, in the arena and even backstage, was completely fooled. In an era all about shock value, this was a masterclass in psychological warfare that you just don't hear about anymore. Section 8. Scott Steiner's unscripted meltdown. If one person embodied the term loose cannon in late-stage WCW, it was Big Papa Pump Scott Steiner. Giving him a live microphone was like handing a lit stick of dynamite to a toddler. You knew something was going to explode. You just didn't know when. One of the most infamous examples was a promo he cut on Diamond Dallas Page and his wife, Kimberly, that went completely off the rails. Steiner was known for his shoot-style promos, where he'd break character and speak his mind. But this was on another level. He launched into a rambling, incoherent, and intensely personal tirade against DDP, throwing out insults and accusations that were clearly not in any script. You could feel the tension through the screen. As you can imagine, DDP was furious backstage. When Steiner returned from the ring, Page confronted him, leading to a real physical fight that had to be broken up. This wasn't a storyline. This was genuine bad blood spilling onto live TV and then exploding backstage. It was the perfect snapshot of how out of control things had gotten in WCW, where the line between entertainment and a hostile work environment had all but vanished. Section 7. Goldberg's Limo Punch Bill. Goldberg was WCW's biggest homegrown star, a true force of nature with a historic, undefeated streak. He was presented as a real-life wrecking machine, but on one notorious episode of WCW Thunder, that real-life persona went horribly wrong. During a segment where the NWO arrived in a limo, an enraged Goldberg was supposed to go on a rampage. The plan was for him to use a pipe to smash the limo's windows. Simple enough, right? But in the heat of the moment, Goldberg tossed the pipe aside and decided to use his bare forearm to smash the windows instead. The first couple of windows shattered, but on one of the last ones, his arm plunged right through the glass, severing an artery. The segment was cut short immediately as blood, real blood, started pouring from a gruesome gash in his arm. This was a legitimate life-threatening injury that took him out of action for months and threw a wrench in major creative plans. It was a shocking moment that showed off Goldberg's intensity, but also the sheer recklessness that was running rampant in WCW. Section 6. Sid Vicious and the Squirrel. Now we enter the world of pure, unadulterated backstage legend. This story is so strange, it's become wrestling folklore, a tale whispered between old-timers that you can't quite believe is real, but you want it to be. The man at the center of it all, the one and only psycho Sid Vicious. Life on the road was a grind, so to fight off the loneliness, Sid apparently decided to get a pet. Not a dog, not a cat. No, Sid Vicious, as the legend goes, got a pet squirrel. The story claims that Sid brought this squirrel everywhere, including to the arenas. One day, in a locker room full of wrestlers looking for a laugh, a dare was made. Sid was bet he couldn't keep the squirrel down the front of his wrestling trunks for a full minute. Never one to back down, Sid accepted. He placed the animal in his pants. For about 30 seconds, all was fine. Then, the squirrel reportedly did what squirrels do when they find nuts. It bit him. Reports from those who tell the tale claim Sid fell to the ground in agony and had to be taken to the hospital for stitches and a rabies shot. While never officially confirmed, it's a story that perfectly captures the wild, almost unbelievable backstage culture of the era. All right, we're halfway through the list, and it's only getting weirder. If you're enjoying this trip down wrestling's most bizarre memory lane, do us a solid and hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. It really helps us out, and trust me, you won't want to miss what's coming up next. Section 5. Vince Russo, World Champion. While some moments are just weird, this next one is a perfect example of creative insanity. On September 25, 2000, WCW's head writer, Vince Russo, booked himself to win the WCW World Heavyweight Championship. This wasn't a joke, it actually happened. In a steel cage match against the reigning champion, Booker T, Russo found himself in the main event. The finish was pure chaos. Goldberg interfered, spearing Russo through the side of the steel cage. Because Russo technically exited the cage before Booker T, he was declared the new champion. A non-wrestler, the man writing the show, had just won the company's most prestigious title. Booker T himself later called the move a breach of a cardinal rule. To make it all even more pointless, Russo would vacate the title on the very next show, admitting he wasn't a real wrestler. It was a move that screamed desperation and did nothing but devalue the one thing that should have been protected most, the World Championship. Section 4. Papa Shango's Voodoo Curse. While WCW was spiraling into chaos, WWE was having its own share of creatively bizarre moments, and there is no better example of early 90s absurdity than the feud between the Ultimate Warrior and the Voodoo Priest, Papa Shango. When the Warrior made his big return at WrestleMania 8, he needed a new villain. That villain was Papa Shango, and what followed was one of the weirdest storylines in WWE history. Shango put a voodoo curse on the Warrior, and it had televised effects. During one segment, the Warrior clutched his stomach in pain, ran backstage, and began to vomit everywhere. But the most iconic and baffling moment came during an interview with Mean Gene Okerlund. As Warrior was cutting one of his typically unhinged promos, a mysterious black liquid started oozing from his forehead and dripping down his face. It was all presented with 100% seriousness, as if this was just a normal side effect of a voodoo hex. The feud also saw Shango setting wrestlers' feet on fire and making the same black goo drip from Mean Gene's arm. It was pure, unfiltered sports entertainment weirdness that felt more like a B-horror movie than a wrestling angle. Section 3. The debut of the Yeti WCW's Dungeon of Doom was a stable built on cheesy, Monster of the Week gimmicks. But at Halloween Havoc 1995, they unleashed their masterpiece of absurdity, the Yeti. The creature was hyped for weeks, frozen in a giant block of ice as an insurance policy for the Giant in his match against Hulk Hogan. When the moment arrived, the ice exploded and out walked a man wrapped from head to toe in what looked like toilet paper. Despite being called the Yeti, he was very clearly a mummy. But that's not even the craziest part. After the main event, the Giant had Hogan trapped in a bear hug. The Yeti lumbered to the ring to help. Instead of applying a wrestling hold, he got behind Hogan and, well, there's no other way to say this, he began aggressively dry humping him in a bizarre double-team bear hug. It was a visual so ridiculous it has become legendary for all the wrong reasons. To make things even more confusing, in his next appearance, the character was dressed as a ninja, but was still called the Yeti. The gimmick was quickly dropped, leaving behind only the memory of one of the single most baffling debuts in wrestling history. Section 2. The Finger Poke of Doom. This next moment is probably the most infamous on the list, but the sheer, mind-boggling arrogance of it and the devastating effect it had on WCW is a level of crazy that's hard to wrap your head around. On January 4th, 1999, WCW was promoting a massive main event. WCW champion Kevin Nash, leader of the fan-favorite NWO Wolfpack, was set to defend his title against the retired Hollywood Hogan, leader of the hated NWO Hollywood. What fans got instead was a slap in the face. The bell rang, Hogan and Nash circled each other, and then Hogan gently poked Nash in the chest with his finger. Nash flopped onto the mat like he'd been shot out of a cannon, allowing Hogan to pin him for the title. The two rival NWO factions then reunited, revealing the entire feud was a sham. To make matters a million times worse, earlier that night, WCW announcer Tony Schiavone, on orders from management, smugly spoiled the results of the pre-taped WWE Raw, revealing that Mick Foley was winning their title. This backfired spectacularly. An estimated 600,000 viewers immediately changed the channel to see a beloved underdog win the belt, only to tune back to Nitro just in time to see that insulting finish. It was a moment of creative hubris that drove away a huge chunk of their audience and is often cited as the beginning of the end for WCW. Section 1. Hogan sees a ghost in the mirror. If the finger poke of doom was the moment WCW's credibility died, then our number one moment is when its sanity was officially declared dead. In 1998, WCW brought back the Ultimate Warrior for a huge feud with his old rival, Hollywood Hogan. The build-up, however, devolved into a level of supernatural nonsense that made Papa Shango's voodoo look like a grounded documentary. The peak of this insanity came when Hogan was in the NWO locker room. As he stared into the dressing room mirror, he saw the reflection of the Ultimate Warrior looking back at him. Hogan started screaming in terror. But here's the kicker. When other wrestlers like Eric Bischoff looked in the mirror, they only saw Hogan. Only Hogan and the TV audience could see the Warrior. The implication was that Hogan was either losing his mind or was literally being haunted by the Warrior, who, I should mention, was very much alive and appearing on the same show. The execution was clumsy, the logic was non-existent, and the result was one of the most unintentionally hilarious and creatively bankrupt segments ever put on TV. It perfectly captures the throw-everything-at-the-wall madness of late-stage WCW, and it stands as the absolute craziest forgotten moment of the entire Monday Night War. From backstage dares gone wrong to supernatural curses and career-killing creative calls, the war between WWE and WCW was so much stranger than the official history books let on. These are the moments that fell through the cracks, the bizarre footnotes in a legendary rivalry that prove just how wild and unpredictable that whole era really was. They may have been forgotten, but they're a crucial part of the story, a reminder that sometimes the most memorable moments are the ones that make you ask, what on earth were they thinking? What other crazy, forgotten moments do you remember from the Monday Night Wars? Did we miss any of your favorite bizarre storylines or backstage antics? Let us know down in the comments below.